So hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming to our NABJ discussion with our guest, award-winning filmmaker, Dawn Porter. Some of you may know that she was also a former faculty member at the J School a few years ago. She used to be the interim head of the documentary program. So we're very happy to have you here. And thank you, again, thank you so much for being here. And of course, for those of you who don't know, I'm Chancellor, and Skyler and I, we're going to be, we're the co-chairs of our NABJ-UC Berkeley chapter, and we're going to be co-moderating throughout the event. Yes. And another thing too,
thanks so much for having me.
Oh, sorry.
Oops, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thanks so much for having. It's great to be back at Berkeley. I loved my time there, and just so you guys have done such a great job in planning this. So just wanted to say thanks for reaching out.
Thank you. Yeah, and of course, I mean, like this is a Black History Month too. We've been spotlighting different filmmakers, journalists, people within like the journalism industry or journalism related communications field. So we knew we wanted to have you here today as well. And another note too, if any of you have questions throughout, just please leave them in the chat and we'll answer them towards the end of the discussion. So, yes. Alrighty, so now just to get started, well, I guess it would be a good icebreaker to have. How are you? How have you been? Dawn.
I keep saying to people, I'm pandemic fine. Like considering that it's, such a difficult time. My family's healthy. We have jobs. We're lucky, but I think like everybody, certainly susceptible to the news that occurs, to worry about friends and family, and worry just about our country. So I think post-election, I'm feeling very motivated and energized. I will say one of the benefits of being a documentary filmmaker is you have an outlet for expression of what you're and thinking things through. So making John Lewis Good Trouble and making The Way I See It during this period has been a real really helpful for me in trying to channel worry into a more positive expression, to invite people to worry effectively, to worry with a hope for a solution, to not just be consumed with anxiety. So for me, filmmaking really has helped me through that. So I'm lucky that that's my job, so that I can get to work through, what I feel about being an American at this point in history in my work.
That's amazing. Yeah, and that actually kind of like leads into my first question too. I know Skylar has one to follow up as well, but kind of starting off too, because you have a very unique background in terms of your transition into documentary filmmaking, because you were a lawyer first, and I kind of wanted to know what got you interested in documentary filmmaking, and how did you like eventually end up making that jump from like being a lawyer going into documentary film?
I was a lawyer. I am a lawyer. I can't stop paying my bar dues because it's like once you've made that investment and you have those letters after your name, I want to be able to use them. The kind of law that I practiced was litigation, and I always think that there are so many skills that a litigator has in particular that are so helpful for a documentary filmmaker. So if you think about what a litigation person does, they take something complicated and they tell a story about it so that it is comprehensible to a lay audience. And that is, that I think is in some ways what we do as documentary filmmakers. We try and gather up all of this information and make it comprehensible. But the other big thing about being a litigator is I took a lot of depositions, and what you do in those is you listen as much as you question. And I think, one of the things for Chris, hi. One of the things for documentary directors is that we should do more listening, rather than pointing. And so I think like all those years of taking depositions, of listening for answers, One of the things that I took from that experience was treating every protagonist differently, figuring out what's the place where I need to place this subject to allow them to remember, to allow them to express what they want to say, not what I want them to say. I'm not doing a scripted project. I want to hear, I want to get beneath the surface layer of the story. So, where do I put them to do that? Like, that's a physical space, that's a mental space. How do I create the conditions that optimize their ability to tell a story? So, but practically, I was in-house at a law firm. I went, a partner was hired at ABC Television as the head of litigation. He invited me to go with him. I did, and then I did some projects for the news division, and they offered me a job. So I just kind of kept saying, like, all right, I'm going to take these leaps. I don't exactly know what's going to happen. It was kind of like coming to the J school. Yeah, I'm going to take that leap, to do something to stretch. And then at some point, I had been working for the news division. I worked for A&E Television. And I thought, like, I could do this. Like, how hard could it be? Famous last words, right? So I went part-time at my corporate job with direct deposit, which, I'm also a parent. So all of you, don't quit your corporate jobs if you have direct deposit and health insurance, because it gives you more time. It may be slower than you like, but it allows you to pursue your chosen occupation with some financial security. And a lot of people, particularly from minority communities, we don't have the luxury of doing internships or doing, those things that get us the skills. So because we need to make money. And a lot of people give up before they reach, critical mass of skill gathering. One of the things that is so great for all of you in the J School is that you are getting those skills right now. You're going to automatically have people know that you have a certain baseline of education, and that's not the case for so many young filmmakers. So, I know it's a sacrifice to do the tuition to pay for school, but also I would just encourage you all to really lean into this experience. Make this your focus. Don't waste this time, because you will not have it again where this is your job. Like, this is your job. Going to school, pressing your professors for what you need to learn. Like, this is your job right now. So really, like, take advantage of that opportunity. I think most of you are. I just want to emphasize how critically important it is to do it while you have this time before the pressures of real work come. This is all about you right now. So, like, lean into that. Take that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's great. I had a question related to COVID, and in the short term, that's affected the documentary field, of course. And what do you think the effects will be in the long term? And do you think that new trends and approaches to documentary filmmaking will come about?
I think, a lot of us, myself included, had to figure out how to film during COVID. And so this particularly was actually, it's worked on all of my projects. We had to kind of really pivot to when we needed to really be in the field and what we could do remotely. And a lot of this was led by our DPs, our camera people. So I tend to work with a lot of the same people, repeatedly. And so because of that relationship, sometimes I didn't need to be in the room with them. I could do it remote, where I just did very emotional interviews over Zoom. So, but I trusted them because I know, part of, like, as all of you know who, do filming, part of what we do in creating the atmosphere that's comfortable for our subjects is to have the right crew. You have to have a DP who's sensitive, who is not going to make the person feel like, uncomfortable in any way. So because I've worked with these same DPs, I know that they will do that. So I don't need to be in the room for that piece of making people comfortable. And what that freed me up to do is say, I know I can send Keith Walker anywhere, and he will treat my subjects with respect and with care and do all the things that I need to do. So I went on a lot fewer interviews just because it didn't feel safe to go fly and then be in a room and all that. So I think what we're going to see is I think a lot of filmmakers have gotten better and better at the remote interviews. I think we're going to continue to see that. It saves cost. You can do more interviews. Like, so for the Pete Sousa movie, we got a lot more time with Pete. He was in total lockdown, would not come out, nobody in the house, nothing. So for Pete, we sent him a camera package and we fiddled around with it. And he basically, so I was always joking. I was like, Pete, we need to give you a DP credit on this because he shot a lot of his own interviews. We were on Zoom and then he set up the camera in his office. He set up two, so we had two angles. For other people Samantha Power, she felt comfortable having a crew come into her house. So we sent a COVID safe crew and they did like long lens, but I did her interview by Zoom. For the mental health project I'm working on, I did a ton of really big interviews by Zoom. With a crew in the room. So I think that some of those techniques, I don't want to fly all over the place. I'd like to have dinner with my kids and my family and stay home more. I like my house. So I think that we're going to see a lot more of that, those techniques happening. All of that being said, there really isn't a substitute for just being able to spend time with your person. So I don't think it's going to supplant filming in person, but I think that I'm certainly going to think of every interview. Do I need to be there or can I do it by Zoom? So I think I'm going to think about that a lot more.
Yeah, those are definitely questions that we have in like the doc program as well too. As well as like, should we shoot this by Zoom or what is a way to like keep the quality there, but also of course like maintain COVID safety too. And that also kind of goes to my next question as well, which is you released two films last year, well, probably more, but two of your notable films were John Lewis, Good Trouble, and of course, The Way I See It for Pete Sousa. And that was during a pivotal moment, like within US history in terms of like the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement. It was also an election year as well. And like, what was that experience like having both of those films come out during that time? And also, of course, like with the late John Lewis like passing kind of shortly after the film.
It's funny, like when I started the path towards having two movies come out, I didn't really think through what that was going to feel like. When you create a movie, there's a period after the movie is done that you get to go travel with it and enjoy it and do press. And I did not think at all about what it was going to be like in normal times to have two movies out at the same time in the same circle. So adding all of that to COVID was, it was stressful because it was like two babies like needing your different attention at the same time. For the John Lewis movie, it was really, really hard actually, because we had no idea that he was ill and he didn't know he was ill. So we had finished the movie, picture lock the movie in like November. And then we had like our finishing and stuff that was going to go into the next year. And he got diagnosed with cancer in December. So like all of my dreams of traveling around the country with the congressman, like just were kind of in doubt. And then I think like everybody who's faced with a person they love with a serious disease, you're hoping for the best, but you're really in your heart of hearts, you know that there's not a good ending coming to this. So I think I was in a little bit of denial about how serious his condition was and just kind of pressing forward. And then when he actually passed away, it was really pretty devastating. And, and you all know a little bit about this now. Think about the process of making a movie about somebody. You watch, you read everything about them. You listen to their voice. You hear their voice in your head as you're cutting. You watch the footage over and over and over. You memorize their speech patterns. And because of that, they inhabit you in a way that only like your closest friends and family. So even though they're not your closest friends and family, you feel like I feel like I could predict, if you asked me a question, what he would say, because I've read so much, I've watched so much, I've talked to him so much. I traveled with him for a year. I've seen him in home, at work, in public, in private. Like, so when he died, it was like a family member died. And I had never had that experience before of knowing somebody famous who had passed away. So his voice was everywhere. Like, I'd come home on the news, it was everywhere. So I actually had to ask the PR people. I said, I can't do any interviews. Like, I can't, like, because of course then I said, I will not profit from his death. I will not use that as a marketing opportunity. So I had to like literally figure that out. And then it was just hard. I'm gonna cry. It was like I just missed him, and I was so sad that he couldn't see the love that was coming for him. So that was a very unique kind of situation. I did get to show him the movie, which before he died, which was incredible. So this was February. It was Valentine's Day, and at this point he was in chemotherapy, and we were just starting to hear little rumors about COVID, if you remember that time period before the lockdown. So his doctors were like, you shouldn't travel. But there was a question about whether he was gonna travel or not. So I said, why don't I just come to you? So I was living in San Francisco. I flew to DC. It was cold. It was Valentine's. I brought him chocolates, even though he had diabetes. He wasn't supposed to have chocolate. It was like, and I was really nervous because I didn't know if he was going to be weak. I didn't know what he was going to be like. So he opens the door, and I just laughed because it was like he was dressed up, like he was always dressed up, and he knew that he surprised me. I could tell that he knew, and he just was very pleased with himself that here he was, like looking the same. And so then I just brought my laptop, and we watched the movie together, and we just sat in his living room, just the two of us, and we watched the movie, and we had tea. And then he just kept saying, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. And I was like, Congressman, your life is powerful. And, one thing I should say is we had a really good time making this movie. John Lewis was the most generous, non-judgmental. He never one time asked me what I was doing. He never said, how's it going? I would say, like, could we go to your house? And he would say, yes. I was like, could we go to Troy, Alabama? He'd say, yeah. He just was like, he just believed like people would do their best. He defaulted to an optimistic view of the world. And because of that, he had no idea what the movie was going to look like. So it was like brand new to him too. Like, I feel like we'll always have that. We had that experience of making it together, and then we had that experience of he was the first person to see it outside of nobody saw it, no other stranger saw it before him. So it's a long answer.
No, I think that's amazing too. And just to show that like what it means to us as viewers too, I think this is like a moment, it's basically history that we're seeing as well, that'll like live on along with his, of course, amazing legacy too. But like the fact that you were one of the last people there, and to be able to capture this is just so significant too.
Yeah,
super grateful for that. Very.
Yeah, I had a question related to story overall, and there's so many stories that need to be told, and what really gets you to say, this is the story I want to tell next?
I think you have to be a little bit obsessed with the story. Like, you have to think it takes so long to do what we do, if you want to do it well, that it's years. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, like, I really like to work on stories of things that people think they know, but they don't really know, and find those deeper layers. So kind of looking for that. And then it's, really, what's the motivation of the person who's willing to be filmed? Are they really willing to be your partner? that way? And can you get to the kind of productive working relationship where there's some mutual trust so that you can really explore and think of creative ways to do things? So all of those things, a lot of projects are presented to me, and so that's a newer thing, like just how many, and part of my problem is like I see like a film everywhere. So I have to be a little more discerning. Like my kids are, when we walk, they're like, don't talk to anybody. Do not talk to anyone, because I like talk to everybody. I think also like I'm really looking now for things where I can push the form a little bit more, or where I can, add something like to the question of like, what does it mean to be a good citizen, a good person, a good contributor? Like, I'm really interested in that question. So I'm kind of looking for projects that help explain that. What's my role as an individual in a society that's so divided? So I'm kind of interested in that question right now.
And just to follow up on that, in terms of telling diverse stories, I know there's this push to like have diverse perspectives, have more diversity within the film industry, the journalism industry, of course, and within documentary filmmaking too. And there's also this question of who gets to tell whose story. If you understand, like, do you think it's okay for someone who's like not part of a particular community to tell a story on that community, or does it seem exploitive in some way? Or what are ways that filmmakers who want to tell a certain story, how can they do that without, making it seem as if they're trying to use someone, or they're not seeming genuine?
I think that this is a really critical question. And I think like probably one of the most important things is to ask yourself the question first. Like, why am I the person to tell this story? I don't believe that you have to have a racial match or a gender match to tell a story. But I do believe that you should ask yourself, what would I be missing if I'm not from the same racial or economic or social background, what might I miss? So to give you an example, there's a project I'm working on with a company about Nelson Mandela, and we have like these amazing 70 hours of tape of him, and the tape is of that pivotal time after he was released from prison, but before he became president of South Africa. So really critical time that we don't focus on with Mandela, right? What kind of leader am I going to be? I can't just be the leader of Black people. I have to be the leader of this whole nation. How do I do that when I was labeled a terrorist and imprisoned? So I have to work with my captors and his struggle in coming to how he was going to do that. That's like a really fascinating question, right? How he's going to do that. I love that question. I wasn't raised in South Africa. I'm not a Black South African. So, one of the things I said was, I think I should work with Black South African directors on this. And, the production company, like, as soon as I said it, was like, yeah, you should. So what we're doing is we're looking to hire 3 Black female South African women to tell this story, and I'll work with them. But, it's really a collaboration, because, if we're having this conversation about who's privileged to tell stories, we have to have it with ourselves. So at the same time, I made a series about Bobby Kennedy. I am not white, Catholic, Irish, or rich. And so I don't want to be prevented from telling that story. So, what I talked about with Netflix before doing that project was, my approach is actually the Blackest Bobby Kennedy that you'll ever see, because it's how did all these Black people influence him, which is a story people haven't told. So I think in that sense, like, I was the right person to tell that story, because I felt like I was filling in some history that we didn't know. If it was just a Bobby Kennedy biopic, I don't know, maybe I would think about that, but I think it's a crucial thing is to ask yourself the question, go through the exercise, so that it's not a surprise. Betsy West and Julie Cohn made the Polly Mary film. I think those are great filmmakers to make that film. They are not Black or gay. They are women, but their discovery of her work came through their research for Ruth Bader Ginsburg's in her papers and how much she was influenced by Polly Murray. And so their perspective is to say, who is this woman that so influenced one of the greatest jurists of our time? So I don't think their white womanhood detracts. I haven't seen the film. I just know these filmmakers and I respect them so much. So I wouldn't automatically say they shouldn't make that, I should make that, because of the way that they came to her story with the right curiosity and respect, and how inclusive they are. So I don't think there's a, like, for me, there's not a hard line about you have to be a match. I think it's like, what story are you interested in this person's story? And then are you the person to tell that piece of it? Because that's the other thing, is there's no one film that's the definitive film about somebody. We all have different experiences with people. We have different takes on it. So I really welcome like lots of films on the same subject. So.
And I also like that you decided to, it's this thing like passing the mic to, like you reaching out to other South African filmmakers for like this new project that you're working on as well. But it seemed like the production company that you're with is like open to doing that. What if some others aren't? Or like, and filmmakers have to like find themselves like challenging or fighting to get this story told. Like, what advice would you give in that situation?
I think that there's actually a lot less resistance if you've thought of the correct approach. So for me, it was, hey, don't we all think this would be elevated by some native South Africans? Do we want to be that Western country, the company that has a westernized, romanticized view of Mandela? And then the answer is no. So then like you gotta come up with something else. So I think part of it is in the approach. I have felt not a lot of resistance when, approaching it as a problem for all of us, an issue for all of us to attack, just like any other issue that comes up in a film. So if I'm doing a project right now about 1920, Red Summer and massacres across the country, there's not a lot of footage from before 1919. So we have to figure out how we're going to illustrate some of those moments. So who the storyteller is and what perspective comes in, I see it as just another factor to consider, just like every other choice you have to make in putting a film together.
Awesome. My next question is a little abstract, but I didn't. Can you speak to your creative process and kind of can you give any advice to students who are currently refining their creative process, and if there is ever not a moment where you're not refining your creative process?
I think that the creative process runs smack into the realities of production. So you have to have enough of a vision to get somebody to give you money. That's just the truth, right? Which means we're often like, people are like, what's your vision? And you got to like have a vision before you've really had a chance to sink into the story. So I think part of the creative process is being able to live with uncertainty, to be able to say, I don't know to some questions. But you should have enough of a grounding in what you want to do to be able to express your enthusiasm and confidence. So, saying, I want to bring John Lewis into the present, and I want to focus on who he is today and how his past influences have made him who he is, rather than just show him on a bridge and, do a TikTok about what happened. So that is not a very explicit creative vision, but it is enough for people to say, yes, I want to keep developing and going on that exercise with you. So I think you want to also leave yourself enough room in the pitching process so that you can go to where the film should be. So that's one thing. But I think it's a constant, this is again, like filmmaking takes a strong stomach because we don't usually work from a script the way that a feature film does. I mean, I think like, I don't know about you all, but as a documentary person, I'm like, who couldn't make a movie if they had a script? Like, we don't have a script. We don't know what they're going to say. So, what I think is getting the confidence to embrace collaboration is really important. So because you're named the director doesn't mean your AP is not going to have a brilliant idea that's going to, and don't be jealous of that or worried about that you have to have all the ideas. Nobody makes a film by themselves. My editor is a close partner. My composer is a close partner. And once you have confidence that you're bringing something to the table, you can let go of the I need to be the boss situation and not be like precious about it. So, but part of it is you should have a feeling about what you want to do. And then you can communicate that feeling to your team. And hopefully you're all aligned in what the goal is, but you're working together to get to it. Do you know what I mean? So that to me is like the sweet spot of filmmaking, inviting people to collaborate. Like you have enough of a vision so you know where you're going, but you invite them to on the, how do we get there? And you can try things and try things that aren't going to work. So but I think always like, I'm always kind of looking for those like keys to what's gonna, solve a puzzle of a film. So for John Lewis, it was how to get him off script, right? So he given so many speeches. I can tell you what he will say if you ask me a question. So how do I get him off of his script? Because his script works for him. It delivers laughs and lines and hugs and tears and all the things he wants, and how to communicate to him without being disrespectful, that I want to shift that around a little bit. So one of the things that happened was we were at a museum and he was watching an exhibit about himself, and it was footage about him as a 19-year-old. And he turns to a person who happened to be a teenager on a, civil rights museum tour. Can you imagine? You turn and there's John Lewis watching himself. Mm-hmm. And he says to this kid who's like probably a teenager, he says, I can't believe that's me. I look at that and I can't believe that's me. And he starts telling this kid a story that I'd never heard. And I was like, oh, that's what he needs. He needs to be brought off of his usual, delivery point. And so we rented a theater and we put him in the dark lights and we surrounded him with screens and showed him just footage with no commentary. And then I said, Mr. Lewis, tell me the story of that day. And he did. He was right there. He was like, that was my seatmate. This is what happened. I was so scared. Da, da, da. He told completely different way. And that's what I mean about what does your protagonist need to really tell you their story. It's not the same for everybody. They might need one person in a room. They might need, John Lewis is so polite and such a Southern gentleman. If we were in his office, first of all, he had to vote every 15 minutes. But second of all, if anybody stopped by, especially with a child, he would go out and say hello, and he didn't want to disappoint them. So I knew that was not going to allow him to go deep enough and be uninterrupted. So we couldn't do it in his office. When we were at his house, he was like, my house is messy. And he was distracted because he thought his house was messy. Nothing we do would be like, Mr. Lewis, we could send a cleaner. No, I don't want you all to worry. So we're like, let's get him out of all of those places and just have a concentrated amount of time. So that's the exercise for every single protagonist. Where do you put them physically to allow them to access their memories? So.
And also, I think one of the reasons why the film was so great too is because you both seem to have like a very good relationship to like filmmaker, interviewer, like protagonist, like relationship. And for those who want to like start making feature-length films, especially feature-length documentaries where you're following someone for a long period of time and you're trying to build that trust, like what would be the right approach to like get them comfortable with you as a filmmaker before you start like bringing in the cameras and everything?
I think it's different for everybody. Sometimes you don't have the luxury of spending time with people before you start filming. And most people who are not, there's famous people and not famous people. So we'll assume this is a not famous person. For a not famous person, people are very familiar with being filmed, right? Everybody has a phone, everybody's constantly doing selfies or whatever. But you should take away some of the unknowns of what we want, which is not a scripted, polished, staged. Everybody who's doing selfies wants to look their best. And what we actually want is people at their worst, right? And that's hard to explain to somebody, how they can trust you enough so that they could be really vulnerable. And that doesn't usually happen in the first one or two situations. I like to do the main long interview well into our relationship, because then I know things to ask and I've seen the person talk about it. I've seen them process it. I've seen how they feel about a certain situation. And there's usually enough trust so that they'll, kind of go deeper. So I try and pick like the first few things that we're going to film as kind of easy things. Like they're giving a speech or they're doing their thing. But you do need to like talk with people so that they're not surprised by what the process of filming is. So if it's just you and a sound person, they may not be thinking there's a sound person coming. So just let them know basics like, hey, we want you to come here. I try and give people as much information about what the process is going to be like, not like, and then some people will be like, what are you going for here? Like, I'm not going for anything. I'm just watching you do your thing. And being patient with people is really, really important. But every single bit of planning you do for your interview is part of building trust. So if you say, tell me what time I need to leave your house. Do you have to pick up your kids? Do you have a phone call you need to make in the middle of the day? What time do you need to eat? Knowing how to make them comfortable and that they know that you're there for them. It is like they are giving you something by agreeing to do this. And so expressing that I'm here on your schedule, you're not on mine, and giving that full attention. All of those things are trust building. So give you an example, doing a thing in which like we're working with some NBA folks, and a person we're working with, we probably did 4 shoots with him before he basically said, my best friend is the real person you want to talk to. So he, I think, appreciated we were respectful, we communicated, he saw we're not about sensationalism. It was only then that he said, okay, I know you're trying to get to so-and-so. I will introduce you to so-and-so as I'm literally his best friend, like from growing up. And then that person who has not talked before did an interview because he felt trusted. But, I think there's a lot of anxiety on our side, on the filmmaker side, that usually comes from lack of money and lack of time. And it's our job to control our emotions about those factors so that they don't impact the subject. It is not your subject's problem that your broadcaster hasn't paid you. It is not their problem that you have to turn this in tomorrow in order to get more funding. You have to be able to isolate them from your problems and really make it about them and not impose your anxiety on them, so more long answers.
No, that's definitely great advice too. And we do, Skyler, I know he has like one more question too before we start opening it up to the audience, because we got a few questions in, but I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, you spoke about communication earlier, um, and I was wondering if you could speak to your evolution or the timeline of how you communicated as a director when you first started to now, and what advice you can give to uh, young filmmakers who are starting to communicate and work with other people more and more.
You know, when I first started, I think I was a little afraid of directing. I think I was so busy trying to be people's friend and to be nice that um, I didn't realize like how you control a set or a place where you're filming is incredibly important. So, um, you know, for me, I always like I build in enough time for the camera and lighting and anybody sound to get their shit together. Because if you're trying to rush them, they don't feel good about it. That tension is communicated to your subject who doesn't know why everyone's upset, but they just know there's upset. It's like a baby. So the first thing is like realizing that doing a good schedule is crucial, is fundamental to having a good shoot day. If your schedule is off, you're going to be in trouble. So that's the first thing. But at some point, and like it happens every shoot, like I'll say, okay, are we ready? Because the other thing is, sorry for you DP people in the room, they will futz forever. And some point you have to say, everybody's gonna be fine with where we are now, you know, and kind of like, and you have to direct and you have to um, let people respectfully know. Part of letting people know that you're in charge is helping them feel secure. If they feel like she's got it, she's not gonna let some annoying person interrupt me, she's going to protect me, she wants the best for me, she wants me to do my best interview. Like part of your job in directing is saying, I got this, you just focus on me, you don't worry about anything else, just focus on me. So I think that all leads me to, and I wanted to explain what I mean by this, people want to be directed. They want to know what emotion what you're protecting them for. You know, do I want you to be able to go to a deep memory here? Do I want you to be able to feel playful here? Like what is it that where do you see this and what do you need? So sometimes I'll say like, I really want to just know how you felt in these big moments. Um, if you know that somebody's going to have to tell you something hard, like they were abused or they were fired or they cheated on their spouse or something, moving to not starting with those hard things. So like I always start with like, tell me where you grew up. Even for like experts, like sometimes I'm like, tell me where you grew up. And it kind of like takes them aback and they're like, oh, I know the answer to where I grew up. And then they just start talking. It's not anything we're going to use, but I do that a lot with people because it also usually makes them happy. They're like, I grew up in da 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 da. Or if it wasn't so great, you'll see that and you'll like stay away from that, you know, but you do something kind of personal that they know the answer to, that there's no memory or they don't have to. So just to get them talking and getting into the rhythm of doing an interview, because there's a rhythm to the way we do it, which is not normal speech. We need them to do full answers. That's not normal speech. If I say, you know, hi Skyler, you don't say, you just say hi. That's not good enough for a documentary. You know, if I say, what'd you have for breakfast? You have to say, for breakfast I had blah 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 blah. You can't just say eggs, right? So we have to train them into that exchange, into how that's going without interrupting them. Because I see so many directors who kind of make their subjects feel stupid, like they have a rule book that the person's failing all the time. I'm like, why would you want them to feel like they're not doing it right? You want them to feel confident. You want them to take charge of the interview in some ways. You want them to like keep explaining. So a lot of what I try and do is giving them power, is putting us back on an equal footing. Another thing to do is if you have the luxury of having a monitor, show the person what they look like. half of what people are worried about is what they look like, is whether their hair is weird or they don't like. And most of the time, people are like, oh, I look fine. And then that goes away. Some people are like, oh, I hate my chin or whatever. But you can usually get them past that because really they know they look fine. And I just sometimes say, I'm like, I don't want you to be ugly in my movie. I want people to look at you. So, like, I think you look great. And I'm not kidding. Because it doesn't help us if they look wacky, right? We want them to look good too, so that they're not worried about that. Anyway.
True. Thank you so much for this. We have gotten a few questions into. One is from, and also you all are free to raise your hand and ask questions yourself if you want to. But I see this one from Grace Oyanubi. Please correct me if I said your name wrong.
Grace.
Yes. Do you want to ask it yourself, Grace?
Hi, Dawn.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Grace. Oh, so good to see you.
Good to see you. Your hair is amazing.
As is yours. What yours always was.
She's my boss. I had an amazing time working with her. So yeah. So the question really I want to ask is, and it's impressive to me, who is always inspired by you. It's impressive to me to see the number of women you employ. You know, she gives jobs to women, you know. So I want to ask you, how do you hope to mentor people that look like you? You know, how do you hope to do that?
Yeah. I mean, I hope that what's important to me in working is having a good working environment. And so I welcome people who want to do that, you know, who it's mutual respect. And I think sometimes in what we all do, people don't focus on how critical it is. Every single job is critical. If you're on a tight set and a tight budget and you're chasing the sun, the person who gets lunch is critical, because or else you can't eat and you're all going to be tired and you can't get it done. And so, like, I mean that really sincerely when I say, like, every job is critical. I think the other thing I try and give people is, like, some expectations of what I need from them, so that, you know, like, the first thing to do is master your job. And then we can look to where you can be pushed a little bit. So Naima Jordan also works with me. She's still working with me. That's been years now. She wants to direct, you know, she's kind of like been like great story producing. So, you know, I'm looking for opportunities where we can do that together, where she can, you know, direct something bigger than a budget she might get, but like with a little bit of a safety net of us doing it together. And that's because she's so excellent at her job. She's an excellent researcher. She's super crazy smart. She's a problem solver. She's all the things you want in a collaborator. And I think it's really important whenever you're working in a unit to think, my first priority is doing my job really well before I start looking for what's the next job. Let's do my job really well, because that's what's valuable to people. And then after you kind of have that rhythm, then you can think about, where can I expand? Because I see too many people who want to skip over the doing my job well part and go to like the next job. These jobs do build on one another. And so it is not wasted to understand the rhythm of a production in being the production assistant, because it tells you a lot of crucial things about how to get stuff done, so that when you are in charge, you will know the things that need to get done in order for you as the director to do your job, right? So I know if there's not transportation, food, craft services, coffee, transportation for the talent, makeup for the talent, time for everybody to rest, if all those things don't happen, then my job doesn't matter, because nobody's going to be ready to go. So you have to know all those things in order to keep moving up. So I think it's clear, it's good to, but it's also really good to respect people and to think about, no one can read your mind, you know? So a lot of times I'm like, oh, I forgot to tell you this really important thing. Like, that's on me for not, it's but I also think like, do not be afraid to ask questions. Even somebody who's like, remind them that like, hey, I just want to make sure we're set for tomorrow. And then most people will remember that they should not be snappish because of whatever pressure they're under, but that you're trying to do a good job for the whole project, you know, so to make people answer the questions that you have.
Thank you. And we have time for, I think, like about 2 more. I know like some students are about to go to class or whatever. So those of you who can stay on, please do. Same for you, Don. Another one is, it's coming from Andy Richard. She did ask about, it was going off of an answer that you had earlier, which was, where do you put your protagonist if their space doesn't work? For example, if you're interviewing someone, but like the space that they're in is not conducive to recording, like how would you work that out?
That's a great question and really important, because while you want to do all the things that are necessary for production, so good sound, good light, quiet and privacy, you also don't want their background to be jarring. So if you're putting a person who's homeless in the Ramada Inn, it might not work. Or else maybe you need to do closer, so that the background is not important. So, the most important thing is really to put somebody in a place where they feel comfortable, where they're not worried about their surroundings. This happens a lot with parents of young kids. Like, you do something in the house and the kid is like climbing up on the counter and then they get worried, which they should be. So sometimes, you suggest that it's better to like, even get a babysitter or a parent or a friend or somebody so that they know that. Think about what is going to distract them. If you think your child's upset, you're going to be distracted and you can't focus on what you need to do. So, and giving people clear time parameters and then sticking to them. So also, I think there are so many class issues in documentary making. Often we're talking to people who are under-resourced. And so being sensitive to the fact that if you're bringing a $35,000 camera into somebody's house and you're trying to explain why you can't pay them for interviews, you just got to think all that stuff through, like how you explain the process and what it feels like to be that person.
Thank you. So I know we've reached the 2:00 mark. I think for the most part, these are all of our questions that we have. We did want to end with basically one. I know you're busy. You have a lot of projects coming up as well. So basically, what's next for you? What is your next biggest project? I know you're working on something with Oprah right now and Prince Harry too, a series about that, and as well as like some other film projects too. So when are those coming out? What is, or I guess when can viewers expect to see it?
Yeah, I'm doing a project for National Geographic about Red Summer and the massacres between 1917 and 1923, and that's going to be out in June. I'm doing this multi-part series with Oprah and Harry about mental health, mental wellness, which will be out this year. What else am I doing? I have a bunch of cool things in development. One about Title IX with ESPN, which I'm super excited about, multi-part. Possibly something on the Supreme Court. And then...
These stories are just coming along.
I know. I'm like, this like sounds stupid. And then a couple of other fun things. So... yeah.
And also, somebody did ask about the MBA project that you have. You mentioned that a bit. Care to elaborate?
I know, I can't tell you, but it's good.
Okay. We'll keep a lookout for it.
Yeah.
So again, thank you so much. I believe, I did get to everyone's questions, so at least the ones that we've gotten in. But yeah, thank you so much, Don, for being here and speaking to us and to our J School community too. It's like we're just so happy to have you back, at least for this discussion.
Yeah, it's so nice to see so many familiar faces. So proud of you guys and good for you for pushing through. This is a tough time, but we need documentary filmmakers more than ever. So what you do is really going to be important. Everyone's going to be looking for your voices. So keep at it.
Thank you.
Thank you.